What's the most haunted house in these United States? Depending on who you ask, you'll get 50 different answers. Let's talk about one of them. Nestled in the quiet town of Atchison, Kansas, there is a place that has captured the imagination of paranormal enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Known as the Sallie House, this seemingly ordinary home is infamous for its supernatural occurrences and sometimes violent hauntings. In the 1990s, the Pikman family moved into the house, unaware that their lives would forever be changed by the supernatural occurrences that would link their names to one of the most chilling ghost stories in American history. But is the Sallie House truly haunted, or is there a darker psychological reason for the terror that gripped the Pikmans? This is going to be a wild ride. The Sallie House, located at 508 North 2nd Street in Atchison, Kansas, is one of the most infamous haunted locations in the United States. Its history combines fact and folklore, making it both a historical curiosity as well as a focal point for paranormal investigations. The house was built in the mid-19th century, though the exact date varies in different accounts, with most sources suggesting the late 1800s or early 1900s. Originally constructed as a modest family home, the house's early records show that it was occupied by ordinary families in the quiet town. Atchison itself has a rich historical background, being a key town during westward expansion, as well as the birthplace of Amelia Earhart. In the growing community of Atchison, it's widely held that Michael Finney had the house commissioned for him and his family, and it was built between 1867 and 1871. It's believed that Michael, his wife Katie, and their three children, James, Agnes, and Charles, lived in the basement of the house while it was being constructed. Michael would die in his newly built home in 1872. However, he was not the only member of the Finney family to pass away in the home. The daughter Agnes moved back into the home in 1906 and got married to an engineer named William True in 1913. True died in the home in 1918, with Agnes following in November of 1939. It's also thought that his son James also passed away in the house. Michael's son, Dr. Charles Finney, reportedly used the house as both his residence and medical practice. The front was used as office space and examination rooms, while the residents of the home lived upstairs. The story of the Sallie House haunting centers around an event believed to have occurred during Dr. Finney's time in the home. It all started when a child named Sallie was brought to his house by her mother with severe abdominal pain. He diagnosed it as appendicitis and believed her appendix would soon rupture. Before the anesthesia took full effect, Dr. Finney had cut into Sallie, killing her as a result. The legend ends with Sallie dying on the operating table, with her last memories being of a man whom she believed was torturing her. Sallie's anger and fear at the time of her death are believed to have anchored her spirit to the house. Different accounts suggest that Sallie was not a patient of Dr. Finney, but a girl who died tragically nearby, with her spirit drawn to the home later for unknown reasons. While no historical records definitively confirm Sallie's existence, the legend has become an integral part of the house's lore. Yet she's believed to be the house's primary ghost, which continues to attract interest. While some accounts portray Sallie as a mischievous child spirit, others depict her as a far more sinister entity capable of causing harm. Over the years, additional tales of other spirits inhabiting the house have emerged, though these spirits' identities and their connection to Sallie remain ambiguous. After Dr. Finney's time, the house changed hands multiple times over the years, with few recorded incidents of paranormal activity until the late 20th century. The home was rented and sold to various families, most of whom reported no significant disturbances. By 1992, the house gained notoriety when Tony and Deborah Pikman moved in and began experiencing intense paranormal activity. Their story reignited interest in the house's haunted history and helped establish its current reputation. Shortly after moving into the Sallie House, the Pikmans started noticing small, strange occurrences that quickly escalated into terrifying episodes. The first signs were typical of a haunting. Cold spots appeared randomly in the house, and lights would flicker or turn off on their own. For her part, Deborah reported feeling an unshakable sense of unease, especially around certain areas of the house, such as the nursery and the basement. She would frequently find toys that had been left in one position moved to new arrangements, such as being lined up or stacked. Balls, dolls, and other toys appeared to be played with, moving across the floor as if an unseen child were interacting with them. Toys would vanish from their usual spots, only to reappear later in odd places like the kitchen or basement. Knives were a particularly troubling aspect of the haunting. The Pikmans reported finding them in strange places, including embedded in the floor or lying out when they had been securely stored. Items such as picture frames, vases, and books were reportedly hurled across rooms with no apparent cause. These incidents often happened suddenly and in the presence of witnesses. Some of the most alarming instances of object movement involved fire. In one instance, a picture frame was reportedly flung across the room, knocking over a lit candle and starting a small fire. Electrical appliances and outlets sometimes sparked or overheated inexplicably, adding to the family's sense of danger. Candles placed around the house, especially in the nursery and living room, would appear to light on their own. Deborah recounted extinguishing all candles before leaving the room, only to return and find one or more mysteriously burning. The activity soon turned violent, with Tony bearing the brunt of this aggression, experiencing a series of physical attacks that left him disturbed and scarred. He reported waking up with unexplained scratches and burn marks on his body, often in the form of claw-like scratches that would appear seemingly out of nowhere. Some of these scratches would bleed or cause pain immediately upon appearing, with no known cause. He would feel invisible forces pushing him or pressing on his chest, making it difficult for him to breathe. This happened frequently, and despite changing his position or leaving the room, he couldn't escape the sensation. The more Tony tried to confront the entity, the more intense the attack seemed to become. These interactions created an atmosphere of tension and fear within the household, affecting his mental and emotional well-being. Deborah and Tony would often hear the sounds of a child crying or playing, especially in the middle of the night. These noises couldn't be traced to any physical source in the house. At one point, Tony saw the little girl in his kitchen, and as a result, sketched her likeness on a drawing that would become quite famous. The name Sallie is said to have been first associated with the entity haunting the house by Deborah, based on a psychic's insight. During the Pikmans' experiences of strange phenomena, they reached out to the psychic medium for help. She allegedly sensed the presence of a young girl and identified her as Sallie. Some have speculated that Sallie might have been a name derived from a misinterpretation of intuitive impressions, as there is no solid evidence of a girl named Sallie linked to the house in historical records. Nonetheless, the name has stuck and is now synonymous with the Sallie House legend. The Pikmans by now had shared their experiences with friends, family, and the local community, which began to draw attention. The intensity of the alleged activity, especially the physical attacks on Tony, made their story compelling. The television show Sightings became aware of the Sallie House and the Pikmans' experiences through the growing local and regional buzz surrounding the haunting in Atchison. How it came to their attention is unclear, but early paranormal investigators who visited the house likely helped spread the word as well. Their documentation of unexplained activity, such as moving objects and EVPs or electronic voice phenomena, seem to have caught the attention of producers or networks who were looking for dramatic, real-life paranormal stories. Perhaps even the Pikmans themselves reached out to Sightings or recommended the case. The show did actively seek out credible documented paranormal cases for its episodes. The combination of dramatic claims, physical evidence, and a relatable family in distress made the Sallie House story a perfect fit for Sightings. The show's producers saw the potential to captivate their audience, so the Pikman family's story gained national attention in 1994 when it was featured on an episode. Their coverage would not only make the Sallie House nationally famous, but also validated it as a serious case in the eyes of many paranormal enthusiasts. Sightings visited the Sallie House a total of 3 times during the 1990s. Each visit further explored the haunting and the escalating paranormal activity experienced by the Pikman family. The initial visit introduced the Sallie House and their story to a national audience, with Deborah and Tony giving emotional interviews about their experiences, explaining how they had lived in constant fear due to the frequent disturbances. Tony shared that he had been physically scratched and attacked, while Deborah talked about her growing anxiety. They revealed their belief that the young girl named Sallie haunted the house, with the name derived from the psychic who had visited, and claimed to sense a childlike spirit. But the Pikmans also reported feeling the presence of a darker, more malevolent energy, which was suspected of being responsible for the more violent activity. The TV crew set up various pieces of equipment to document the paranormal activity. This included cameras, audio recorders, temperature gauges, as well as motion sensors to capture any phenomena that occurred during the investigation. The psychic was also brought in to help interpret the spiritual activity. Her insights were central to the investigation, especially when acknowledging the presence of the young girl named Sallie, as well as the more sinister, malevolent force in the house. From the onset, the Sightings crew began experiencing significant equipment malfunctions, a hallmark of paranormal investigations. Cameras would inexplicably shut off, or the footage would be corrupted. This was seen as a possible sign of paranormal interference, as it mirrored the Pikmans' previous experiences with lights and appliances behaving erratically. Cameras and other electronic devices drain their batteries at an accelerated rate, even when fully charged. While in the presence of the crew, Tony Pikman was visibly scratched multiple times on his arms. The scratches were described as deep red marks that appeared to form in sets of 3. This happened while Tony was not touching anything, and no one else was near him at the time. Items, particularly in the nursery, were reported to move on their own. A toy reportedly moved across the floor, and furniture was displaced. In some cases, objects appeared to levitate or were thrown across rooms. The team experienced sudden, unexplained cold spots, especially in areas associated with intense paranormal activity like the nursery. Temperature fluctuations are often cited as evidence of a ghostly presence or energy fluctuations in haunted locations. The psychic present claimed that Sallie was not malevolent, but rather seeking attention and trying to communicate. However, she also sensed the darker presence that appeared to be influencing or amplifying the negative activity in the house. Her reading suggested that the more malevolent spirit or energy was present, possibly tied to past trauma or death in the house. This darker presence was believed to be responsible for the more violent and disruptive phenomena, especially the attacks on Tony. After Sightings had aired their first episode, interest in the house had increased significantly, both from the public and from paranormal investigators. The team returned to Atchison to follow up on their initial findings and to gather more concrete evidence. During the second visit, the crew used a wider array of paranormal investigation tools to document the phenomena. The team used better quality audio equipment to capture any sounds or voices that might indicate paranormal activity. They were hopeful that this visit would provide clear evidence of the house's disturbances. With the experience of the first investigation, the team now focused on documenting temperature drops and cold spots, especially in areas like the nursery where much of the activity had been reported. The crew also placed motion detectors around the house to capture any movement or changes in the environment. They also used high-definition video cameras to record activity throughout the night. Tony Pikman, who had been the target of previous physical attacks, reported more intense scratches and burns on his skin. At one point, the scratches appeared in real time while he was being filmed, consistent with the previous reports of unexplained injuries. These marks were described as being painful and deep, often appearing in sets of three, which some investigators believe could be symbolic. Much of the violent and physical phenomena was again centered around Tony. He was reportedly scratched, slapped, and even pushed during the investigation. The crew and investigators believe that the malevolent entity targeted him specifically, possibly because of his sensitivity to the supernatural or due to his emotional vulnerability. The constant activity took a toll on their marriage and mental health. Tony, in particular, reported having terrifying dreams and a growing sense of dread, which he attributed to the influence of the haunting. Deborah struggled with the fear and stress of living in the house, especially with a newborn child to care for. The family left the home in October of 1994, after the activity reached an unbearable level. They moved out quietly, but the story of their experiences became widely known through documentaries, books, and interviews, including their involvement with Sightings. They claimed that even after leaving the Sallie House, they reported lingering effects of their experiences, including nightmares and a continued fascination with understanding what had happened to them. The Pikmans returned to the Sallie House in 1995, primarily at the request of the Sightings show, which had been documenting their experiences and investigating the haunting. The show's producers wanted to conduct further investigations, capture additional evidence, and explore the lingering paranormal phenomena associated with the house. The crew and paranormal investigators used high-quality audio equipment to attempt to capture any potential EVPs. Several were recorded, some of which were clear and chilling, adding to the already eerie atmosphere of the house. Psychic Peter James, a recurring investigator on the show, believed that the energy in the house could still be tied to the Pikmans, especially Tony. Their return was seen as an opportunity to explore this theory and communicate with the spirits. The Pikmans' return also allowed them to confront their fears and attempt to gain some sense of closure regarding the traumatic events they had endured. One of the most notable EVPs captured was the voice of a child, which some believe to be that of Sallie, the young girl purported to haunt the house. In this recording, a child's voice can be heard, which is not audible at the time of the recording. The voice sounded playful and innocent, but also unsettling. The voice was reportedly saying words like hi or Sally, which seemed to confirm the psychic's earlier assertions that the child's spirit was present. This EVP contributed to the narrative that the spirit of the girl was haunting the house, making it one of the more poignant pieces of evidence supporting the Sallie theory. In one instance, a member of the investigation team asked, "Is anyone here?" And a voice responded with something unintelligible, but distinctly clearer than background noise.
For you to show them that you're really here.
Another EVP captured during the second visit was described as a disturbing, unintelligible voice that sounded deeper and more malevolent. This recording raised the possibility of a darker force present in the house, as it seemed to come from a different entity than the childlike voice of Sallie. It sounded like it was growling or speaking in a tone that was ominous and threatening, suggesting the presence of a more malevolent spirit. The final visit of 1995 expanded on the ongoing activity and highlighted the psychological toll the haunting had taken on the Pikmans. It also marked one of the most dramatic investigations of the infamous haunting. This episode became a pivotal moment in the house's paranormal lore, as it involved disturbing activity and chilling evidence that left a lasting impression on both the show's team and viewers. Cameras malfunctioned and strange shadows were observed. Tony experienced scratches and burns appearing on his body in real time, a phenomenon that had been the hallmark of the haunting. Peter James, who had accompanied the crew on previous visits, communicated with what was believed to be the spirit of Sallie. However, he also sensed the sinister presence that seemed to overshadow the childlike spirit. James described the energy in the house as oppressive and warned of the potential for harm to anyone who lingered there. This final sightings episode on the Sallie House concluded with a grim tone, emphasizing the dangerous nature of the haunting. The investigators and psychics warned that the house's activity could escalate and that might be unsafe for future residents. The show's team ultimately advised the Pikmans to not ever return to the house, as the haunting showed no signs of abating. After the Pikmans moved out of the house, there is limited information about subsequent residents. Some reports suggest that a woman briefly lived in the house after the Pikmans, but her identity is not well documented. There are anecdotal reports of a few tenants attempting to live in the house after them, but these individuals reportedly left quickly due to the unsettling nature of the paranormal activity. This may be more myth than fact in order to enhance the house's nefarious reputation, but details about these tenants are scarce, and their identities are often not disclosed, possibly to protect their privacy. The house was vacant for long stretches of time following the Pikmans' departure. Its reputation as a haunted location likely deterred many from renting or purchasing the property. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Sallie House had shifted from being a residential property to a paranormal hotspot. The city of Atchison and the property's owners leaned into its haunted reputation. The house began hosting guided tours, especially around Halloween, allowing visitors to explore its eerie history. Paranormal investigators, ghost hunting teams, and researchers rented the house for short-time stays to document its activity. Ownership has changed hands a few times, but the property is maintained primarily for public access and paranormal research. There have been skeptics and researchers who have questioned or refuted the Pikmans' claims about the Sallie House haunting. While the story has captured widespread attention and become a cornerstone of paranormal history, not everyone accepts it at face value. The central legend about the spirit of Sally, who died during the botched appendectomy in the house, has no historical records to support it. Research into the home's history has not revealed any documentation of such an incident, which casts uncertainty on the claims of the paranormal activity there. Some skeptics have pointed out inconsistencies in the accounts provided by the Pikmans over time, with critics suggesting that the details of their story have evolved, potentially to align with growing public interest or media narratives. Others have proposed that Tony's reported attacks, scratches, and burns could be psychosomatic or self inflicted, either consciously or unconsciously under stress or suggestion. Skeptic Joe Nickel displayed how blood appearing on Tony's torso could be done by using items purchased from a magic shop. However, that explanation doesn't seem to line up with observing scratches forming in real time on the show. The involvement of Sightings and other media outlets has led some to speculate that the Pikmans' experiences were exaggerated or dramatized for television. The events at the Sallie House remain shrouded in mystery, leaving behind a legacy of fear, loose ends, and continued intrigue for paranormal enthusiasts. The haunting of the Sallie House remains one of the most talked about cases in the world of paranormal investigation. For the Pikmans, their time in the house was a terrifying chapter in their lives, a chapter that many believe still exists there, waiting for the next person to experience its dark secrets. But the true story of the Sallie House, with its many unanswered questions and chilling history, may never fully be known.